So yeah, welcome back, everybody. So next up, we have session 7 of this year's conference. So having looked in detail at things such as sustainability and around other elements like that, we're now going to switch slightly and look more at the connectivity side of things. So we're going to have a session now, which is going to be focusing specifically on future of converged connectivity. So looking at direct-to-device and hybrid connectivity, obviously something that over the last couple of years is receiving a huge amount of interest. So great to have a discussion focusing specifically on this. So we have, once again, fantastic panel of speakers with us to discuss these issues. And delighted also to have Natalia here from Jusso, Natalia Vicente, who's going to be moderating the session. So Nat, great to have you here. I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan. And indeed, it's a pleasure to be here today. I think that the topic brings a lot of attention, and I like to see that there's a full room. And of course, I'm very happy to be also with all the experts today. I think my job is going to be very easy because they are the ones that know better. But indeed, if I may, we have this topic of the future of converged connectivity, and for sure, converge, integration, hybridization even, it's becoming kind of the words that we use daily. And what I like especially is that in a space forum, we also have representatives from the terrestrial side. What means very much that we are having this multi-stakeholder or this collaboration together. So indeed, we've seen during yesterday and today different topics in extent. And today we are more focusing on the innovation side, the possibility side, no? And this is at least one of the ways that I would like to start with the overview of this panel. But also what I like is that we have a little bit of everything here in this panel today. So definitely, let me introduce my panel because we are with Gerasimos Sofianatos, Head Unit of Radio Spectrum Policy from DG Connect, Julie Kearney, Chief Space Bureau from the FCC, Luciana Camargos, Head of Spectrum of GSMA, and Yasrin Ibanyaya, Senior Director of Advanced Concepts and Technologies from Viasat. So indeed, a little bit of all the flavors that we need when we come to innovation. And to start with, Gerasimos, indeed, with the Commission and with the new Commission and everything that's happening, innovation is happening even in the Commission. So what are the policy initiatives that are being considered when we talk about all these D2D and the development of the integration? What do you think the Commission, or what can you share with us that the Commission is putting in place for this to happen?
Yes, can I? Okay, it's working. So first of all, thank you very much for the question and for inviting me in this panel. And I understand it's for me it's a new constituency, but I see that you are quite close together, and I like this. So my name is Gerasimos Sofianatos, and I'm the new head of unit in DG Connect B4, Radio Spectrum Policy. I'm actually starting only on Monday, so this is my baptism of fire. But I was very happy that when I was given the opportunity to speak to you and to get to know you, this came very timely. This event is also very timely because it comes during the period of the public consultation of our white paper. As you know, the Commission has adopted a white paper on how to master Europe's digital infrastructure needs, where we had the chance to give a bit our vision about the future of the telecom sector and what are the challenges that it faces. And if I could resume and try to summarize this vision into few words, would be that the future of the telecom sector, in our view, is about convergence. Convergence of telecom networks with cloud and edge computing into what we call the connected collaborative continuum. The 3Cs network is one part. But the convergence also of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks is another. And I think that the white paper gives a lot of focus on satellite connectivity. The word satellite features 18 times, I think, in the white paper. So it's quite many times for one technology to feature in a policy document like this one. And why this? This is because I think satellite could be a solution, a means for Europe to bridge the digital divide, to ensure that it can cover the remotely and sparsely populated, the remote areas and the sparsely populated areas. It can help us achieve our 2030 digital decade targets which are for gigabit mobile and fixed connectivity for everyone. Now, of course, in addition to this, direct-to-device has the potential also to bridge the gaps in terms of access to emergency communications and ensure resilience of networks. We have seen in the recent geopolitical situation and concerns that we have with Russia's aggression war of aggression to Ukraine, how important it is to have communications and what is the complementary role between non-terrestrial communications, terrestrial communications, and submarine networks. My last 2 years, I was working in a unit financing submarine networks and 5G. So I know very well how all these can work together. The integration of the terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks, of course, is not new. You know it probably a lot better than I do. It started in 2010 with the work to integrate satellite into 5G networks. And I'm sure we will hear a lot today about 3GPP release 17 and how the standards have been developed to integrate satellite into 5G. The work is continuing, and I think since 5G will be a building block of 6G, we will see satellite even more prominently in the future. Now, we know that in 2027, the WRC will spend a lot of time on satellite, and satellite, to a certain extent, will dominate the agenda of the WRC. But Europe cannot wait until 2027 to develop a framework for direct-to-device. We have the operators will already come to the member states. Member states will have to have the tools ready to enable this market to develop. We will hear, of course, what is the approach of the FCC. I'm very, let's say, happy that I will hear it from the Julie herself. So I think it will be it is an approach which is very interesting, but we always have to think that Europe is not in the same situation. We do not have the same. We have a geographical particularities, specificities, and we also have a different regulatory framework, in particular with national assignment of rights of use of radio frequency. So we need to find our own way. We need to develop our own framework there, of course, taking lessons and trying to see what works and what doesn't work in other jurisdictions. So in our white paper, we have proposed some scenarios for thought, food for thought, and we are waiting for the feedback on them at the end of this week. 30th of June is the end of our public consultation, and in particular, we have proposed a more enhanced collaboration and a more enhanced spectrum authorization procedure for satellite spectrum, with the view to creating this, to incentivizing the creation of pan-European operators. But in addition, last week, on the 18th of June, the Commission asked the high-level radio spectrum policy group to deliver an opinion about direct-to-device and the authorization of satellite constellations, and we will be looking forward to receiving this opinion at the mid-2025. I think maybe, as you know, from our side, it's not the first time the Commission has been harmonizing satellite spectrum. Coming also from my previous experience in the implementation unit, the MSS 2 gigahertz decision back in 2007-2009 was our first attempt to harmonize and to apply an authorization procedure which would be European and a selection in Europe. And now those licenses are coming to an end in 2027. So we are reflecting about the future of this band and of harmonization in this band. We are having and I'm closing with this, I know, we are having a workshop in 2 days on Thursday, which is a public workshop. Our contractor is organizing it, Detecon. I would very much like to see most of you there and listen to the interim report, interim, let's say, findings. Thank you, and sorry for taking a bit.
No, indeed, and you have brought lots of topics that I think we will continue discussing: 3GPP, MSS, direct-to-device, of course, but also the particularities between Europe and other regions that are maybe taking steps a little bit faster in certain things, or have an idea. And of course, we have Julie, and it would be great to hear about what the FCC is doing, and of course, what has been happening during this last year with the Space Bureau and everything that's around, and all your activities on the integration of technologies and how to give that framework to support it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natalia. And thank you to Forum Europe for having me today, and just really appreciate your remarks. If this were a job interview, you'd be hired. So thank you so much. I'm Julie Carney. I'm Chief of the Space Bureau at the U.S. Federal Communications Commission. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a truly innovative technology that we are calling in the U.S. Supplemental Coverage from Space, or SCS, not SES, because when we say it fast, it sounds like the satellite operator. So I'm going to talk about SCS. I'll try to alliterate as much as possible. You should hear us at the office. SCS. Wait, which one? SES? SCS. And then we have Senior Executive Service, which is a branch of the government as well. So there are a lot of acronyms. So SCS. So it is not often that we as regulators get to do something earth-shattering. And I'm really excited that we are on the cutting edge of the SCS technology. I'll be focusing my comments on what's happening in the US, what we're seeing in the market, and where we're headed. In March of 2024, just a few months ago, the FCC adopted rules to advance the FCC's vision for a single network future, in which satellite and terrestrial networks will work seamlessly together to provide consumers with coverage that neither network can provide on its own. The Domestic Regulatory Framework, SCS, will allow collaboration between satellite operators and wireless providers to enable satellite connectivity directly to consumer handsets, using spectrum that was previously allocated for terrestrial wireless. So we intend to build on this framework to enable SCS deployment in additional bands and scenarios. But now our framework is just an initial step to encourage the development of SCS while minimizing the risks of harmful interference to existing terrestrial and satellite networks. And we take that very seriously. We're mindful of our international obligations, and I think I need to emphasize that in this room. So we'll continue to engage and talk with our international colleagues as the technology is deployed globally. So the US framework, it focuses on the use of spectrum bands that were previously designated for terrestrial use, but it also requires collaboration with terrestrial use licensees, so existing space-based coverage bands allocated to mobile remains distinct from SCS. This is really important. We recognize that outside of the US, SCS from space may occur in bands that were not allocated for such services in the international table, and US licensed space station operations must be consistent with the ITU radio regulation article number 4.4. Again, really important. Given that these are new rules, we clarified the international coordination obligations in our rules and outlined steps to ensure that SCS operations will be consistent with relevant ITU regulations and some express conditions in the SCS licenses that we will be granting. So US licensed space stations intending to provide SCS outside of the US, they must certify to the FCC that they've obtained all necessary authorizations from relevant countries and demonstrate that such operations will not cause harmful interference to operations in conformity with the ITU radio regulations before they may initiate service in those countries outside of the US. So we've been very careful. We had an open comment period. We incorporated, actually, we were able to produce our rules in quite the speedy time, but we did spend a lot of time on this international coordination piece, really to ensure that we're being mindful of our global obligations. So in addition, we have what's called a further notice of proposed rulemaking, where we'll be talking about seeking comment on 911, which is our emergency service, and location-based routing for SCS voice calls and texts, and other procedures to, again, protect radio astronomy, which, as we know, is very important. We've had a lot of critical engagement, not just within the US, but also outside. So in sum, SCS will enable consumers to have greater connectivity in more places, including remote and unserved areas, as well as areas affected by disasters. And I know you talked about that, Gerasimo, as well. And this technology is going to save lives. I'll give you a few examples. A family of hikers was in a national forest. They were reported missing. A member of the family was able, with their mobile phone, to activate its emergency SOS feature via satellite, and they were located. They had hiked over 13 kilometers, ascended nearly 1,066 meters, 4 adults, 2 children. The rescue process alone took 24 hours. Imagine if they had not had that access to emergency services via satellite. Very different scenario. Last August in Lahaina in Hawaii, you probably heard over here about the disaster that struck. One of the examples of many was a family trapped in, or actually youths trapped in a van. The fire was approaching. They had nowhere to go. Ocean on one side, blackened smoke on the other side. They were able to activate the feature. Emergency services were able to retrieve them, and they have a happy ending to their story. So I have numerous examples where satellite has saved lives via terrestrial. So in the future, we'll be using SCS not just for safety of life, but we'll be able to bridge the digital divide, activate IoT services, spur innovation, support additional new services that we don't even know about today. And we hope that our rules will spur that innovation. And as we talk about the present and the future of connectivity, reminding ourselves of the rules that we generate today will have long-term impacts. And it's just really thrilling to be on the forefront of satellite connectivity, to see what we can do, to collaborate with our partners in international settings. And it's a privilege to work with all of you. And as we learn and iterate from our own rules, I hope that we can share and help to grow the rules internationally as well. So looking forward to the Q&A and to hearing from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I like that in a panel of innovation, we are precisely focusing a lot in the digital divide, or the rural areas, or the emergency situations that we know happen normally in places where precisely we don't benefit from a good connectivity or even connectivity at all. And so it is interesting to see that past a few years, we see that innovation and those digital goals of bridging the digital divides in general come to being together. And indeed, I think we heard yesterday from many speakers, but that a mix of technologies is part of the solution. And for that, we see that there is much more collaboration happening between the different technologies. We heard cloud, but between the terrestrial and the satellite sector, and the integration that is happening. And of course, Luciana, indeed, we have heard it, Release 17 was a milestone. There's work ongoing now, but definitely GSMA is working very much on the integration, and is a necessary partner. So what are the steps that you think are needed for this integration to actually be a success between the mobile and the satellite sectors?
Thank you very much, Natalia, and thank you very much for having me here today. I think I'm the odd one out in the room. I do know some faces, but not that many faces, and thank you very much for this. For the GSMA, it's really important, the connectivity, the being able to provide this service which saves lives. And at the end of the day, it's a service that we all want to access as a consumer. I want to access, you all want to access. No one wants to get out of mobile coverage, but we all do. There are a couple of elements that I think are important for us to address and for us to understand where the market is, what the market can do, and what the market cannot do. In terms of terrestrial connectivity, I think we have reached, for the terrestrial service, for 5G, 4G, whatever technology is, I think we have reached the coverage that we are going to reach. We have gone into low bands, we have gone on bands below 1 gigahertz, we have reached a lot more than we did before, we have reached indoors a lot more than we did before, but there is a limit, a physical limit, and also an economic limit that is possible to cover more than we have today. So if you look at the right-hand side, and I just have to show that slide just because I said to Natalia yesterday, I'm going to be saying a lot of statistics, and it was going to be quite confusing if you can't see them. So bear with me there. So all these numbers, and I forgot to put the source, I apologize, come from a report that GSMA does, the State of Mobile Connectivity, SOMIC, Mobile Internet Connectivity, and we published one in 24, and that's the most up-to-date result that we have for that. So if you look at the coverage gap and the usage gap, for those not familiar with the terms, coverage gap is the population that is not served by terrestrial mobile internet. The coverage gap is the population that is not served. The usage gap is the population that is served but does not use it. And that is a huge problem. Different problems in different parts of the world. There is a number of reasons why people might be part of the terrestrial coverage but might not use it. It might be affordability, it might be literacy, it might be gender. Our report goes into a lot of detail of what that happens, and we're looking to work with governments to make sure that people can actually use the internet. So if you look at the coverage gap in Europe and Central Asia was 6% in 2015. It went down to 2% in 22. So actually the population is pretty much covered in Europe. In other areas of the world is different, but let's stick to Europe since we're in Europe. When you go to the usage gap, it was 38% and reduced to 19%. So the direction of movement is good, but there are still people who are not using, and we need to address that. But the one thing that I think is important for us to understand is that we don't think in the mobile industry, in the GSMA, and we've been discussing that extensively, that the satellite hybrid connectivity will address the usage gap. People are already living in terrestrial connectivity areas. They could be served. They are not being served. Flying a satellite over that area is not really going to help that person. However, the coverage gap, we believe there is a huge potential for us to work together to address. And also, there is a lot of areas where people don't live, but they go, and businesses are, that could be potentially a huge case for us to work together. And we would like to work together with the satellite industry to address the coverage gap, but also to address deserts and mountains and seas. And that is something that we see as very, very, very important. So having said that, and if you look at worldwide, the numbers on the left are the worldwide numbers. We have 57% of the world is connected to the internet. 38% is not. That is important, that the usage gap. But when you look at the number that I use, there's 4.6 billion people who are connected to mobile internet today. That's great. That's a huge, huge number. Most important thing for us, this service needs to be protected. We cannot jeopardize a terrestrial service that's being used by billions of people around the world and hopefully growing number of people by the introduction of the satellite service. So we need to work together so the terrestrial services continue to be operational, and I don't know a single person anywhere that would say, no, we don't want to have that. We all want that service to be protected because we're all users of that service anyway. But we want the added side of the satellite connectivity. I come from Brazil, huge areas that are not covered. I would love to be able to be connected wherever I go, wherever my family goes, I would love to be able to be connected. So how can we work together to make sure that that happens, that we are able to build those systems to work together to be able to provide that service. And I think that's why I'm here today, and I think that's why both industries are working together to make sure that is possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luciana. And I think we are taking the steps to do that. We heard yesterday GSMA and GSO are collaborating quite a lot on these matters. And you talk and you mentioned a few points that I think they are interesting also for Yasreen to pick on them, because indeed I think you're very right that there's many services in the different technologies that we rely on, and they need to be protected in different ways, and we need to identify what the protection is for each of them. But there's one that you mentioned, precisely the usage of for those that are covered and don't use it, but also for those that do not have coverage yet. And I would like to hear a little bit of that usability part. What are the innovations that Viasat is also bringing to the table in that sense of how can we make sure that this D2D and the integration of technologies is actually usable for the consumer and it fits the purpose that we are trying to fill, that is also on different topics like agriculture or education and so on. So Yasreen, maybe you can tell us a little bit what Viasat is doing on all this.
Sure. Thank you, Natalia, and hello, everyone. So indeed, I work for Viasat, which is a satellite operator that provides connectivity to the direct-to-consumer market, but also what we call the mobility market, which is the aviation, cockpit safety or passenger connectivity, the maritime safety or crew welfare, the government, civil, military, and humanitarian, and the other vertical that is quite important and is booming at the moment, which is the direct-to-device and IoT. And so we believe the major innovation that has happened is the one we've been referring on in this panel, which is the release 17 of the 3GPP standard body. What happened is it was back in June 2022. This is the first time ever that the 3GPP has standardized both terrestrial and non-terrestrial into a single standard. What that means is that the entire ecosystem, the terrestrial ecosystem, which I mean by the chip makers, the phone makers, will be the vendors for the various infrastructures will be integrating both terrestrial and non-terrestrial capability into their product. That means we can now become a mass market operator, not just a niche market like satellite has been until now. And the ecosystem is changing as well in the way we're addressing the market, because now the value chain is changing and the consumers are sometimes owned by mobile network operators and the subscribers. So there's a huge change there about working with these big players. So when we talk about D2D, what does that mean? And it stands for a lot of things for different people, actually. It stands for direct to device, but it could be direct to device being your smartphone, your handheld. It could be direct to device being an Internet of Things device. It could be also addressing the market verticals I just mentioned that Viasat is operating into, such as the aviation and air mobility, the future of drones. It could be maritime applications and also unlocking in each one of those verticals a brand new set of use cases. And it could be also greenfield market verticals. You talked about emergency services. It could be the connected car world, where now we're talking about e-calls. You said you could be in the middle of the mountain and have an emergency, but could also be you being on your car and your car is automatically calling for a rescue and sending a GPS position and things like that. So this is where we see the future evolving, and there's a huge growth expected in that area. So for us, what is Viasat doing specifically? First of all, we're starting with perhaps the low-hanging fruits, which is leveraging on our existing geostationary assets in the existing frequency bands we're operating into, and providing what we call narrowband IoT, which is this messaging capability directly to smartphones and IoT devices. And we've done that with one of our partners, and today, globally, you can have access to this narrowband IoT capabilities directly to your smartphone from anywhere on Earth and from GEO. So this perception that GEO might not be usable for IoT is not so accurate. But then when we get to very high throughput requirements, we're talking about another 5G standard, which is called New Radio. And New Radio is this protocol that will unlock not only the messaging use cases, but also the very high throughput use cases, where we covering use cases such as a video call or let's say a FaceTime. This is not necessarily something you can do with narrowband IoT, but it is something that you will be able to do with New Radio. And so for that, you need satellite closer to Earth, you need wider bandwidth, and this is where the LEO constellation provide that augmented capability for those high capacity demand use cases. And that's an area Viasat at the moment, back to your question, what are we looking into? Is into exploring this LEO concepts to augment our existing assets and capabilities with this new layer as well.
Thank you very much. I like that everything is really becoming that ecosystem that we have been talking about for years. Now we have the terrestrials, the GEOs, the MEOs, the LEOs, and taking a little bit of and any other technology. I'm just focusing on the ones that we have, of course, in the panel. One of the things, and before I open the floor, because I would like to hear if the audience has more interesting questions than the one I could do. But all of what we are talking about sounds good. How are we making sure that it happens, and what are the challenges? Because there will be regulatory challenges, there will be technology challenges, and there probably will be business model challenges or market challenges that we will see. Is there enough market for all of the innovation that we are bringing to the table? So it's a very open question with a lot of topics to tackle, and I don't know who wants to start with them, but maybe let's go back to the Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe regulatory challenges are more close to us, and I will speak mainly for them, but maybe I will also want to react on some of the points that were made by the other speakers. For us, we need to start by creating a framework, a regulatory framework, which includes all technologies, which fosters competition, which enables innovation, and is a framework which is open and that lifts any impediments to the deployment of this service. So, of course, when you think how to do this, the availability of sufficient spectrum is the first thing that comes in mind. We need to ensure that this service also has access to sufficient spectrum in the relevant bands. But even more important than the existence of sufficient spectrum is regulatory certainty, in the sense that the assignment conditions, the assignment procedures, the conditions have to take into account the inherent specificities of this service. And this is by definition a cross-border service. And this is, of course, needs to be taken into account when we are developing this framework, when it comes to cross-border coordination, when it comes to harmful interference. But so we need to devise a framework which respects which protects the other services, as it was said by GSMA. We need to make sure that there is protection of services which are working in these bands. We also need to protect and to respect the sovereignty of other countries, like Julie said very nicely. So all this needs to be factored in. In the EU, we have a long tradition about roaming, and we are very much like to be able to use our devices wherever we are in whichever country we are, either transiting or even sometimes even more staying there for even more time. So also the roaming between different constellations, between different cooperations of mobile operators and satellite operators is something that we'll need to look at. Quality of services is key also for the end users. And of course, to have good quality of service means you need to have a seamless handover between the services. But also we need to see the latency. I heard from the other speakers speaking about innovative use cases, like, for instance, connected and automated mobility. All these industrial 5G use cases rely on low latency, and we also need to see how the KPIs, the quality of service is there. Security also is something very important. And also lawful interception, in particular when the core network is located in a different member state or even outside the Union. Security and lawful interception, and in general, how to consolidate the core of the network between different member states is a point in itself, which is a part of our white paper, and where we're trying to incentivize the provision of cross-border services, also lifting in any case obstacles to the provision of services, also by allowing member states to consolidate their core network and lifting the barriers. And then maybe just to remind the subject of the previous panel, sustainability. I think this is also something we need to see. Competition is good, but we also need to be mindful that this is a complementary service, that and we need to be sure that no excessive debris is created, and of course but we use it proportionately, let's say.
I think we definitely have a challenge if we have to do and take in account, of course, all these things. And I think it's going to be a busy next 12 months, but also a busy mandate for the Commission, and definitely for us in that case. And really a little bit of the same question, but also, of course, you have a different perspective. And adding to the question, do we have the opportunity to trial fail, if we have a certain business model and it doesn't work, or if we have a certain technology that finally doesn't work, do we have that opportunity, or do we have that in our pocket or not?
Well, when I was growing up, the phrase around my house was failure is not an option, but creativity is. And our job as regulators is to promote an enabling environment for new technology. And in the end, we know that these new technologies can provide myriad social and economic benefits. So rather than looking at it from the failure option, I think as a regulator in the new Space Bureau created by our FCC chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel, iterating on what we have had in the past and looking at the future and being transparent in our processes will allow us to build regulations or take away regulations that aren't serving us anymore. So ultimately, it's our job to make sure that we are engaging with stakeholders. And I know from this particular stakeholder, we hear from you and we appreciate knowing what rules are working for you. The FCC, our Space Bureau, was formed in April of 2023, sorry. It's been a year. We just had our first anniversary. Happy birthday to us. But we launched something called the Transparency Initiative. And the goal is to go through our different rules, orbital debris, our payload review process that we conduct in conjunction with other agencies in the US government to make sure that satellites that are going up on launches are licensed and safe, but ultimately to make sure that failure doesn't happen, that parties understand our rules. And if they don't understand them, then we have an open forum for them to ask questions to help us. Do we need to do a new rulemaking? Do we need to streamline our rules? So ultimately, in order to not have failure, you have to have this open circle where people are invited in, and we're creating rules together with the knowledge to ensure that we're promoting a prosperous space age. I hope that answers your question.
Very much, definitely. And of course, at any point, feel free to jump in the others. But Luciana,
I just wanted to say that it's very nice to hear that of the inclusive process, because we also believe that the way we are making legislation in the EU and we are regulating also, but is also inclusive. And on direct-to-device, for instance, the RSPG has been given a mandate last week to present an opinion on this and on the authorization of satellites, and it's going to be an inclusive process also in the EU, and we hope that this is also the way. We are also convinced that this is the way to move. So it is now the moment to give the input, take the input from the industry, from in the different fora, and yeah, hoping that we follow well the example.
And if I may, we have on our website, www.fcc.gov space. I always want to say backsplash for some reason, backspace space. And then you'll see our bureau and we have a link on our transparency initiative that talks about it's a step-by-step. If anyone here wants to launch a satellite, commercial satellite, you could do it hopefully from our website with all of the information. Plus we're available to talk to you. How novel.
That's great, and I hope that some of the people will check it for sure. And especially it helps very much on the learning lessons for other countries and for the industry and to input also the regulators with whatever it's needed. And Luciana, building on this, and of course, the industry sees the challenges and the regulatory challenges in a sometimes different way than the regulators themselves. But also, building a bit on this, now that the technology seems to come and that we are getting those steps together, we will touch upon the regulatory challenges, but what are the lessons learned that we have as an industry to make things maybe go faster or easier in the countries or in the areas where coverage is not there yet? Have we learned something in the process to make it better? So.
Thank you. Yes, I think I heard today that we can't wait for WRC 27. I completely agree. If satellites are being launched and if the service is there to be provided, we can't stop the technology, we can't stop the evolution. And we are very excited that it's possible, finally possible to connect a phone to a satellite. I've been in this game for long enough, and I remember IMT 2000 had one of the characteristics of IMT 2000, and the year is 2000, was a satellite component. And that was a failure. I actually once wrote a paper about it on my master's, and my teacher marked, is this really a thing? I was like, it was supposed to be, it didn't. Clearly that was one of the failures of 3G, but maybe we'll correct it with 5G. And I think that's really exciting that we're finally able to do that. I think addressing the frequency bands is one of the most important thing. Is it going to be possible to operate in the same bands as mobile operators? What are the conditions for that to happen? What's the separation distances? How seamless is this? How does it work for the consumer? Is the consumer going to be able to simply roam, or does it require anything on the part of the consumer, which I find very unlikely that they will be able to do? And all sorts of things need to be addressed to be able to sort. If it's not in IMT bands, of course, we have the MSS bands, we have all the S band that in some cases been unused or not used to the full capacity that could potentially be used as well. And it sits next to the IMT bands. Will the phones be able to cope with that? So I think we need to understand how the technology is able to what the technology is able to provide. So we need to put the regulations in place. We're super pleased to see that FCC went ahead and put the regulations in place for the service to operate. We're looking at very carefully, seeing what it is that what we would like from the GSMAs to be able to provide guidelines to government in terms of regulations that the mobile operators are happy with, that they're happy that they won't be interfered, but that they would like to see the service. We had our board meeting at the GSMA in February, and we had all the board members very excited about this and asking, can we make this happen, please? And we are here mandated to make it happen. But the regulation needs to be put in place. And I think we need to do something interim. If we need to review that after WRC 27, we will review at WRC 27, but we can't just sit and wait until WRC 27 continues, because the service is there and the interest is there.
Thank you very much, Luciana. And it's I like the concept, and I think we've heard it during the last yesterday and today, and also last week during the Spectrum conference here in Brussels. On the one hand, we need predictability, but on the other hand, things move so fast that we need certain flexibility, or things be adaptable to a certain extent. And how to balance those two, it's, I think, the challenge itself for the regulators and also for us, the industry, on how the things move forward that fast. And I want to hear, Yasreen, from your side, from the Viasat side, how do you see all these challenges? What is the position of Viasat in all these? And but also in moving forward, how do we make sure that considering that all these services more and more are going to be seamless, and Luciana was mentioning also many on the roaming, or this is going to be starting to be more global even. how are all the players going to be in the same field? How are we making sure that the services are provided and we are investing in the different industries in Europe as we are, or in other regions? So maybe you can share with us.
Yeah, sure. So one of the points that Gerasimo, you mentioned, which I think was very important, is the regulatory certainty. That's one of the first challenge we need to tackle, and making sure as part of the 3GPP we've had inclusion of the MSS bands as part of that, and that's very valuable, and we need to continue on providing that kind of certainty, because we can straight away provide that kind of services. To your point on how are we going to all work together, I think now more than ever before, we're going to have to collaborate with GSMA, with GSOA, with the regulators to provide that single voice, because the satellite community is fairly small in comparison to the terrestrial world, and we have to have a single voice. The other challenge is what is the size of this market for us as a space community? And that's a big question mark today. Because the value chain is quite big. You have different incentives. Chip makers want to sell chips. Phone makers want to sell phones. Mobile network operators want to sell a package. But then we're the last mile resource that is using the infrastructure in space. And we also need to get our share of the cake, I would say. And that's where there's a lot of questions around business model and how are we, who's owning the subscriber? How are we doing roaming agreements? Those are very fundamental questions, and I don't think there's a single answer today. It's more an explorations with the mobile network operators that are ongoing at the moment for those particular markets. So, and then for us, there's another challenge, which is when you think about a LEO constellation, it's a global constellation. It's not a European constellation or an American constellation. It's actually global. And we know that 80% of the customers are located in 20% of the world, but they're distributed all over. So how are we making efficient use of those constellations in a way that is actually serving the purpose and closing the digital divide and providing all these emergency capability, etc. Which means we need to continue pushing for interoperable infrastructure, for augmenting each other's capability, being open and standard, and also keeping in mind the sustainability element as well, in order not to overcrowd space when it is not necessarily needed.
So this brings me to open the floor to see if there's any questions that I hope, voila, I already see hands. So we have a hand over there at the end. Please introduce yourself before you ask the question so that we all know who you are.
Hello, I'm Luis Miro, the moderator of the previous session. So the race for latency gains in space connectivity services. Sorry, I'll begin again. So the race for latency gains in space connectivity services leads satellites to be at lower and lower altitudes. And this has important implications in terms of space sustainability, because this means that you need more satellites to have the same coverage, and then you reduce their lifetime because you have more atmospheric drag. So this means more manufacturing, more launch, more re-entry, and maybe even more light pollution. So how do you see this trade-off between space sustainability and latency gains? Do we necessarily need low latency to bridge the digital divide? Or can we focus maybe only on some particular applications that do not require low latency and while preserving space sustainability? Thank you.
So I don't know who wants to take the question first. I'm going to look at everyone. Julie?
So the question was, how do you balance lower latency with lower orbits and space sustainability? Was that the question? Okay, thumbs up. Yay, I heard correctly. So at the FCC, we're looking at this very closely. We have orbital debris rules baked in to our licensing process, and we are looking really carefully at every application that comes in, and it's really important to us. We talk to the radio astronomy community, and we're very appreciative of the inputs there. So I'm not giving you a complete answer, but it is top of mind. We just celebrated our 20 years of having orbital debris rules in place. We're one of the first, and we take it very seriously. And we know it's a very careful balance between providing a usable service versus making sure that we're protecting space for everybody. I think you said it really well, Yasreen. We're working together. It is top of mind for us, making sure that we're protecting our skies.
And I don't know if the Commission wants to intervene on this and getting the question a little bit more that, as they were saying, do we need low latency for everything that we want to give?
Yeah, on this one, because I also mentioned the latency in my reply. First of all, we should start from the principle, which is technology neutrality, service neutrality. It's not for the regulator to impose a specific service or a specific technology to the market. But of course, also having heard the discussions in the previous panel, and we also need to make sure that we use the right technology for what we want to deliver. And I think there is in the space there is room for everyone, but we should also not overdo it and replace, let's say, the fixed networks or the terrestrial networks by satellite. So there needs to be a balance between always the cost of the service, not only the economic cost, but also the environmental cost, and the benefits, the societal benefits, environmental benefits. So I don't disagree with. I think what you are saying is correct. There shouldn't be, let's say, latency is not necessary and it's not critical for every service. But I would not exclude that there is the possibility also to have to develop use cases which rely on low latency from satellite, provided that this is needed and there is to a certain extent a proportionality between the means employed and the objective pursued.
And then perhaps the one of the dimension as well to consider is also the risk assessment of you can have a constellation at a higher altitude, but using very large antenna arrays, and what's the impact of that versus a constellation closer to Earth, but using smaller spacecraft. And I think those are the things that we're going to have to educate ourselves as the sustainability agenda grows, to be more specific in the risk assessments when a license is being granted to an operator to launch a constellation.
You wanted to add anything else, Julie?
I wanted to say that I really appreciate the question, and I think we've come a long way in 20, 30 years with discussions about space sustainability being really important and, as I said, baked into our entire view of how we're launching services. And it's very refreshing.
And indeed, I think we are seeing this a bit more of the multi-approach of the different orbits. And Yasreen, you were saying it depends very much, and we have heard it, it depends very much on what are we trying to give and what do we need, no? I don't know if there's any other question, or we have a shy audience. But if there's no more questions, I will ask still some questions. Okay, in that case, because one of the things that I wonder, all this integration, all this D2D, all the efforts and investment that comes behind, what is going to be the disruptive, whether it is for the handset or the IoT, what is going to disrupt the market that is going to make all this investment worth it? All this time that we're spending on this, what is going to change so much in the market? I mean, when we had the 4G, of course, we had the smartphones and the iPhones, and now we're talking about 6G and how this integration of technologies, apart from just having it, what is going to disrupt clearly the market so that we will need it all the time?
I think I can't look into a crystal ball, but I can tell you what we're seeing now. So we're seeing more startups. we're seeing more newer entrants able to enter this market. I think the technology itself has enabled more handset operators having us be more creative about how we're using spectrum. So I think that technology itself is the disruptor, and it is breeding a lot of new innovative products and services. I think also you mentioned, Yasreen, that it's, MEO, LEO, GEO have all been a part of this process in delivering broadband. And I think we talked a little bit about use cases. It'll depend on what it is, what is the service you need and what is the best orbit for you to be getting that service from. But I do feel like we're seeing at the FCC just a lot of new companies coming in and saying, I want to be a part of this. And with that, creating partnerships with other technologies.
I agree. And I think just like you're using today your phone and you don't even realize that you're using GPS satellites on a daily basis, I think this is where it's going to evolve, is every single sector will have a space capability embedded, and we may not have a space focused conference anymore, but more on the various fields, energy or automotive, etc. And space will be one component of it because it can be derived in so many different ways now.
Luciana, please.
I think there's some elements to it, and I do think that connectivity is good. Connectivity is always good. So you bring connectivity to areas that are not connected. Maybe people haven't thought yet what they would do with that connectivity because they haven't had it. So we're having chats, for example, with farmers, and we ask, what is it that you do? How could you increase your productivity, for example? And they say, I don't know. I have never had to think about that before. So I think that both sides need to come together, the potential customers, but also the providers of technology, to understand what sort of data they need, what they can do with the data, and how that can improve their business, how can that improve society in general? And I think that's a challenge we'll have to have. People who have connectivity today are very used to it, and they have improved their businesses and their lives with it. People who haven't really thought about that. And I think that certain sectors have thought about that less than others. And I think it will be part of our job, our challenge, to make sure that this happens, and then it will be a big game changer in my view.
I totally agree. I think that's the digitalization, the real digitalization of the different services. And just to wrap up and to end, when are we going to have all this? When is it going to be in our handsets? Are we going to come here next year just talking about the use cases that are already alive, or do we have to wait still another 20?
I think it's there now. You've seen the Apple phone providing satellite connectivity already. And over the years, the consumer will evolve in understanding how to use their phone, how to point it, how to whatever. And as I said earlier, we're already providing that on future generation phones. So it will only evolve, but it's already there.
Gerasimos.
Regulation normally follows business, but so we are a bit slower than this, so we are not already there. But I think this year will also be of great importance for us. I remind you the two, let's say, parallel strands. We have on the one hand the opinion of the high-level radio spectrum policy group, which is going to be prepared. We are expecting it for mid next year, so it will be a year of hard work for them. And also on the MSS, we also have a lot of work to do until 2027. We have the study ongoing, and on this, we already had the RSPG opinion last February. So for us, the work is now intensifying, and we want to do it as inclusively as possible, as Julie said.
Julie?
The rules are there in the US, so I won't speak for our industry, but you can read the press, see what the announcements are, and it's really exciting.
And Luciana, to close it.
I think the technology is coming along, and it's very exciting. We need to put the regulation in place, and thanks to the US for having started on this, and that will lead us. But I think I have one big question in my head, and what's the business model? How can that be afforded? Who pays for that in the end? because there is only a limitation in terms of the customers, how much they are willing to pay for a service. And this is something that as an industry, we really need to come together to be able to provide that service. Otherwise, the technology and the regulation won't be much use.
Well, thank you very much, because I think we will not only speak about this today, and in next year, I hope we can talk about all the advances and we can meet each other. And please join me in thanking the panel, and let's continue talking in the break after, not now. And now there's another panel. Thank you very much.